This is my second room in the workshop. If I don't use it in a couple of weeks, it gets filled up with junk, just like this. And I designed it to make wiring looms in, and that's what I've got to do today. So let's get it sorted out. Now I don't usually work on things like this mechanically, but for wiring looms, custom and one-off bikes are the things I love doing. So today I need to plan the wiring loom, but first we need to get all this old wiring stripped off. And that took so much longer than it needed to. Oh well, we can get rid of this and start the new one. So before I make any loom, I make a rope model, just like this. That way I can do all the terminations, plan out all of the plugs, where all the locations are gonna run, make sure it fits right, make sure I've got everything before I make it on the bench. I usually chop up the old guides and make them into the new ones, but it's all getting a bit short, so we'll get some new rope. It'd be rude not to get some coffee as I'm here. Now I can just run the rope where the loom is going to run on the bike. I've got the junction on the loom, I'll add in the rest of the wires that we can then run on the bike to make sure we get the lengths correct. This one's going to be an earth. That's all of the sections for the rear end planned. I like to use different thicknesses of rope so it kind of mimics how the loom's going to run. That way you can see how much room you've got, how much space things have got to be, so it gives you a good idea of what the loom's going to look like once it's built. Get it all taped together. And now we'll do the front end. So this is the loom guide. I'll print out a wiring diagram, one I made for a bike almost identical. So I'll just copy that one I made previously, move it onto this loom. Then all I've got to do is grab sections of wire and then run it on top of the loom guide, connect it all up, sheath it up, we're good to go. I did just buy coffee, so I'll make a cup of coffee and then I'll answer the Q&A questions you sent me last week. So these are a handful of the questions I got on my Instagram page. What do you do when you don't know how to fix something? Research it, look in the manual, find out online. There's so much information about there. If you've got a general idea of how something works, you can usually work out how to fix it if you've got a manual in your hand. Would you have a carbed bike or an FI bike? Which one would you prefer? Fuel injection all day long. My race bike's a carbed bike. Well, I just quite like that bike. If it was fuel injected, I'd much prefer it. I know they're harder to work on yourself, but once they're set up, they're so much more reliable. There is a reason why every bike nowadays, or for the last 20 years, has been fuel injection. Where'd your passion for motorcycling start? How did you open your first workshop? I did a video on this about how I opened my first workshop. Take a breath and a sip of coffee. I did a video on how I started my first workshop a while back. Go check that out if you haven't known it. But my passion came from, I just wanted to race. Like, I really wanted to race. I actually wanted to race on the track more than I wanted to do motocross. But when I was 17, I couldn't afford it. So I got a trailer, a motocross bike, and went and did motocross. Actually ended up loving it, did 5 or 6 years racing motocross. And then all I wanted to do was work on motorbikes from that point forwards. Would you rather have arms for legs or legs for arms? That's easy, I'd rather have arms for legs. You can still do everything you need to do. How much did you invest in your shop overall when you got started? That's an impossible question to answer. I collected tools from the day I was a motorcycle mechanic, and I just carried on doing that. When I first opened my workshop, I only had just enough equipment to get by. I had to spend a few £1,000s on things like benches and a lift, and then I just did it over time. Accumulatively, I have no idea. I'm still spending money to this day getting tools and stuff I need for jobs I need to do. How can someone become a motorcycle mechanic? What are the steps to take? Get an apprenticeship. It's the best way to get into it, and that can either be purely at college or through a company that will give you an apprenticeship and then to give you day release. I actually started out as a car mechanic, not a motorcycle mechanic, and then transitioned after I did my car mechanic apprenticeship because the qualifications are movable. But do that. And if you're too young and you want to just volunteer somewhere, I worked in a bicycle shop, but you could volunteer in a motorcycle workshop. That is the way to do it. Volunteer somewhere if you're too young. If not, try and get an apprenticeship. What products do you use in your pressure sprayer? I'm assuming you mean this? It's just brake cleaner. I usually buy it by 5 litres, but whatever I can get, I'll shove in it, but it's just brake cleaner. It's really handy for loads of jobs. You'll see every mechanic in the world use loads of brake cleaner for loads of different things. It's like the magic fluid. Do you lube your motorcycle chain every time you go out for a ride? Definitely not every time. That's definitely over lubing your chain, unless you're going out for a 1,000-mile ride every few weeks. But it depends on what you're doing, what weathers you're riding in. If you're riding in wet weather conditions, you need to do it more often. If it's lovely and dry, you don't have to do it as much. Best way to do it is to look at your chain and see the condition of it. If it looks dry, put a little bit of lube on it. Little and often is always the best way. If you're riding something like a motocross bike off-road, lube it quite regularly. I used to do mine every 40 minutes of riding it when I was going around a motocross track, because that is what you need to do. But you just want to find that happy spot where you've got a nice amount of lubricant on the chain, and you also haven't got excess there that's going to flick off and coat your wheel and the backside of your engine. So just look at it and assess it. Right, that'll do for now. I've got work to get on with. Now that was a good cup of coffee. I got this BMW stripped out on the bench yesterday. Chain and sprockets, brake pads are now here. So we'll get it back together. With the bike in gear, foot on the brake, you can then torque up the front sprocket. Just got to drop the front pads in, and then we can take this on a test ride. I rebuilt and cleaned these yesterday. All right, let's take this for a spin, bed those brakes in, and then we can come back and check and adjust the chain. I can't believe this morning it was absolutely pissing it down. It's so handy having mirrors, I can check the GoPro's on. Well, I guess you guys don't really want to watch me recheck a chain, so that'll do for today.